So there's something that I don't understand about the things the human race has done over time. And when I'm thinking about things like space travel and underwater exploration, like scuba diving, when I think of astronauts and scuba divers, the thing that occurs to me most is not the fact that we swim underwater and we have traveled into space. What I can't understand is how we got the conception of these things in the first place. How did we ever imagine that we could go into space or that we could go underwater as a scuba diver does? What I really don't understand is how we could ever have the idea that these things would be possible. And the same thing goes for flying, I suppose. How did we ever get the idea that we could possibly fly? And obviously, how did we possibly get the idea we could go to the moon? It doesn't make sense to me how we got the idea. It would be similar, I suppose, to imagining something really weird, like, I don't know what would be really weird, like going underground without having a tunnel or whatever. It would be like imagining we could go through the earth as if we were ghosts or something, or we could just float through the earth and we wouldn't need a tunnel and we wouldn't need to dig or anything. We could just move through the earth. And obviously, that's impossible. We can't do that. But then flying is also impossible. And going underwater without air, whatever, is impossible. But somehow we conceived of the possibility of doing something. And then we proceeded to find a way to do it. So finding a way to do it is secondary, as far as I'm concerned. That's not what I'm concerned about here. What I don't understand is how we got the idea in the first place that it would be possible. Doing it, finding a way to do it is secondary, and I suppose that's more reasonable. It makes sense how we could find a way to do something. But what I don't understand is how we conceived of it in the first place. How did we ever imagine we could fly to the moon? How did we ever imagine we could go underwater and breathe underwater? I don't understand how we got the idea that it would be possible in the first place. It just doesn't make sense how we could imagine going underwater like a fish and staying there. And then when you get the idea, then it makes sense that you could find a way to bring air with you underwater. That makes sense. But how you could conceive of it in the first place doesn't make sense. So I need to look into how we learned to do scuba diving, and I need to look into how we got into space. And I'm most interested in how we got the idea in the first place that it would be possible to be an astronaut, or that it would be possible to be a scuba diver. And so what is making me wonder now is that it seems to me the idea has to come first, and then you proceed to find a method to achieve the goal. So the idea is the first thing, and The idea of being able to travel to the moon doesn't make sense. I don't understand how we got that initial idea. And it doesn't make sense how we could even think about it. And the same with scuba diving, I suppose. How would we get the idea we could be like a fish? There's no, I can't see a route that we could conceive of it. I suppose with scuba diving you have dolphins and whales and whatever, and they're air breathers, and they could bring air with them under the sea. That makes sense to an extent. But with space travel, there's no creature that can fly into space, and flying is another thing as well. How did we get the idea we could ever fly? Again, with flying, you can see insects and whatever. So, in a way, I suppose there is a route to that kind of thinking. But with space travel, there is no similar thing. There's no creature that can fly into space. So there's no example to follow or try and copy. It's completely original thinking to imagine we could go into space. So I suppose once you get into the air, again, how we go into flying, I can't understand. But we got into the air, and then I suppose you could start to see space and imagine going into space. I suppose so. But there's no example to follow. There's nothing at all which makes sense in terms of arriving at that possibility. So I'd be interested in researching this and working out how we could ever imagine we could fly. How could we ever imagine we could go underwater and stay underwater like a fish? How would we ever imagine we could fly into space? It simply doesn't make sense how we got the idea in the first place. And then doing it, finding a way to do it is secondary. It's the original idea I just can't understand.